Welcome to the Silver Screen Guide podcast, where we discuss films from every genre. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the podcast. Well, listeners, I have to apologize, actually. Last week, I told you we were coming back for Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers. And if you listen to that, I was a little excited. Well, I looked at the schedule afterwards, and I realized we won't be coming back to Halloween for, well, I guess after this, it'll be another week, I believe. So, there's an interesting story why we are doing the Cloverfield Paradox today, and why we are doing Avengers Infinity War next week. It turns out both of them were moved from their original release dates.
Oops.
So we kind of had to fiddle with the schedule a little bit, and that's why Halloween was pushed back just slightly, but not by much. So we will be coming back for Halloween, but not for about another 2 weeks.
Right. Both of them, funny enough, they just happened to be scheduled one right after the other, and then for whatever reason, they decided to move. We'll get into the production here in a sec about this movie and why it was moved, but Infinity War that's a different story.
Yes, which we will talk about next week.
Yes.
The Cloverfield Paradox is directed by Julius Onah. He is from Nigeria, and this is basically his first movie. He's pretty much a no-name. He did a movie. I did not take the time to write it down. It's probably some really direct-to-DVD type of thing. That's what It seemed like anyway to me. So I'm wondering if this is kind of a pattern that they're going to start doing, because for the first one, Matt Reeves was fairly unknown. He had done some stuff, but this was before his Planet of the Apes movies, which really propelled him, and now he's doing Batman. And the last guy, Dan Trachtenberg, that was his very first movie, and so this is Julius Onah's very first movie. So it makes me think for Cloverfield 4, we're going to get a brand new no-name director. I don't know how to feel about that, because I love what Dan Trachtenberg did in the last movie. I was extremely impressed. As for Julius Onah, well, we'll get into what he does with this movie.
Right.
This movie stars Gugu Mbatha-Raw. I had no idea this was her name, because we both saw her in A Wrinkle in Time. She is the mom.
Oh, that's where I saw her. I forgot about that movie.
David Oyelowo, what have we seen him in? I guarantee I have seen David Oyelowo. I don't know how to say his last name.
I don't know. I can't remember. I know I feel like I've seen him before, but I can't remember what other movies he's been in.
Daniel Bruhl, John Ortiz, Chris O'Dowd, Axel Henny, Zia Zhang, Elizabeth Debicki, Roger Davies, Donald Logue, and Simon Pegg?
Simon Pegg. Yeah, it's funny. This is a pretty no-name cast, with the exception of Simon Pegg, of course. How interesting.
Simon Pegg is just a voice on the radio.
Right.
I was very surprised when I was scrolling through the credits, because Simon Pegg is a fairly big actor. And, of course, he's worked with J.J. Abrams, who is producing this movie, who was pretty involved in all of the Cloverfield films. This is his production company that makes it. So it was interesting to see Simon Pegg. You can't pick him out in this movie, honestly.
Right. It's kind of the same with, whatever his name was last week over the phone. Bradley Cooper, that's it.
Bradley Cooper.
Yeah, kind of the same deal with Bradley Cooper, where they are just a voice that they use.
So next time for the fourth movie, I'm expecting another big name in a voice on some kind of machine. I don't know how that's going to work with the setup, but we'll talk about it.
Right. Do we have a release date for the fourth one, and should we trust that release date?
I am trusting the release date. We will talk a little bit more about this once this review has concluded. But we do know it is finished filming. I know that doesn't mean much, because this movie finished filming like a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
Pretty much. And I do believe The release date that we have is when we will get the movie, but we'll talk about that in a little bit.
Right.
The movie is written by Oren Uziel, who wrote 22 Jump Street, the Netflix movie Shimmer Lake, and he also directed it. And he's writing the new Mortal Kombat movie.
Oh, they're making another one? Oh no!
Yeah, I think I smell a retrospective coming on. Nah.
All right, you had me scared there for a minute. Actually, that would have been okay to do, I suppose. The first one, I haven't really seen the first one, but I know the second one has quite the reputation.
Oh yeah, they both do, especially the second. Maybe someday, we'll see. Anyways, I should note that the story was also done by Doug Young, who actually wrote Star Trek Beyond, but he's in just a story by capacity, not in the screenplay.
Gotcha.
Bear McCreary is actually back doing the score for this movie. I'm a little disappointed because they didn't utilize McCreary's talents very well. I felt like the score was really front and center in the last one. It worked really well. It was an incredible Bernard Herrmann-esque Hitchcockian score. I think from what I could pick up with this score, it was good, but I just wish I could have heard it better.
Yeah, there are moments that I think it was utilized pretty well. For the most part, it, for me, just felt quite generic and was pretty forgettable. But,
sure.
Yeah, you think you're right. They really should have utilized his talent a lot more than what they did. And that's pretty sad that they weren't able to do that with this one.
We also have a different director of photography, aka cinematographer, which I don't really understand because I thought the cinematography for the last one was really well done.
I know. And maybe he was just booked by something else or whatever happened. But yeah, not returning, which I feel with this one also, because it's kind of the same thing where they're in this very confined space once again, but we're not getting the same DOP for one reason or another, which is pretty sad.
Honestly, I'm very confused why we have a really big production crew shakeup aside from Bear McCreary pretty much, because the last movie worked extremely well. Like, the crew, they just praised the crew and the commentary and the special features. They worked extremely well. And then for some reason, it's not like Dan Trachtenberg's busy. He's basically done nothing since 10 Cloverfield Lane. Right. I don't know why they didn't get him back. To me, it just sounds like they really want all new people and they didn't really use Bear McCreary's talents to the fullest. I don't get that. I do understand that these people have worked, not all of them, like the director. I don't even know where they got this guy from.
Right.
And Oren Uziel, they just picked him up from Netflix pretty much. So, but the director of photography, he's done a lot of famous work. He's done Star Wars The Force Awakens, Amazing Spider-Man 2, John Carter, Mission Impossible 3, Star Trek 1 and 2, and he also did the new Pacific Rim.
Okay, so he's
interesting.
Had his hand in a lot of sci-fi.
Yeah, that's true. He has done a lot of sci-fi. He has clearly worked with JJ before. He has done a number of Disney, a number of Marvel, so he's clearly got the resume for it. And I don't really have too many complaints about the cinematography in this movie. It's fine. To me, it kind of walks the line between playing it safe and just fine.
Yeah, like you said, it's nothing really to shake a stick at here. It's just kind of is there. At least we can see things, and it's framed relatively well. So that's I mean, at the very least we have that. So like you said, there's nothing really to talk about with it.
I would say he's kind of trying to copy some of the cinematography from Alien.
Yes.
I definitely got like Alien vibes with some of the shots running down the hallway and just empty hallways or whatever.
Yeah. He actually utilized that Dutch angle, I think, a little bit too much.
Especially towards the end with one specific character.
Yeah, especially when we get towards the climax. It becomes a little bit overused.
This is the first movie in the series to make the jump from PG-13 to basically an R rating.
Right.
Since this was released to Netflix, it was not released to the Motion Picture Association of America, therefore it doesn't have one of the usual ratings. It's rated TV-MA, which is basically the equivalent of the theatrical R rating. I'm kind of wondering why this movie needed to be rated R. Clearly just because of the language, and I would say there is some gory-esque scenes, if you can call them that. There's some... This movie likes the violence and the deaths, I would say.
Right. Unlike
the other ones.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's weird.
It does ride that PG-13 R rating. I do know that there are a few movies that do get the TVMA rating, but were originally rated PG-13. So that's my guess. It was, I think for me, from what I saw, it's just barely on that rated R rating. So, I see it more as just a heavy PG-13 than an R rating. Some of the images are pretty graphic for PG-13, but I don't think it would scoot it past up into an R. But it is possible. It didn't get a theatrical release, so it's kind of impossible to tell.
From what I understand, it's probably the language that pushed it.
That could be very true. That I could see.
Well, let's talk about the budget for this movie, because originally the budget was planned to be about $5 million. This was going to be distributed under like a smaller label that Paramount owned, but that studio kind of folded. Paramount, well, they started doing more things with the movie. This movie was announced, I believe, later 2016, which was not that long after the second movie released. I remember hearing like, oh my gosh, they're already working on Cloverfield 3. Well, anyways, before we get too far into some of the production details, I wanted to touch on the budget, because ultimately the budget came out to be about $45 million.
Yeah. What happened was they moved... it's kind of funny because 10 Cloverfield Lane and this movie were picked up at the same time. But yeah, they moved that from Insurge Productions to just the main Paramount label, and so they got a lot more money. And it ended up being $45 million instead of the $5 to $10 million that they were originally supposed to have.
Well, a $45 million budget is the biggest one. That's 3 times the budget of the second movie and 1.8 times the budget of the first.
Yeah, that's a lot of money.
Oh yeah, especially for these movies that are all about being a lot smaller, with doing more with less.
Right. This
movie it ballooned out of their control, I think. And they ended up selling it to Netflix for about $50 million. So they made back the money plus a profit, so that's good. But it should be noted, Paramount still has the distribution rights for home video.
That makes sense, though, because they sold the rights for viewers to Netflix, but kept the distribution rights. That makes sense. That gives them a lot more money.
It's been out for a few months, and there's still no talk of a disc release. To me, it kind of seems like they're giving it the same theatrical runtime release. Comes out in the theater, you're not going to get it on home video.
Right. I mean,
depending on popularity, for a number of months.
It makes sense to not release it on video just yet because it is on Netflix. So why would you want to own it if you can just get to it on Netflix? I think that's kind of where the mindset is at. They may just be waiting for a while to release it onto Blu-ray or whatever. I'm sure that'll happen in the future eventually. But that's what I think so far.
What did you think of the trailer?
So I watched the trailer that was published to the official Netflix YouTube channel. That's a weird trailer because I can't remember the name of the song, but they have this pretty lighthearted song playing in the background, and then it starts off fine and everything's great, and then it just kind of slowly descends into madness, and you kind of get the sense of, okay, this is a horror flick, right? But towards the end of the trailer, there's so much dissonance between the song and what's happening on screen that I was just like, what is going on? Because usually you would have, 10 Cloverfield Lane, the trailer for that one kind of also slowly descended into madness as well, but you definitely got this horror vibe off of it. This one just feels like whoever put the trailer together didn't know what they were doing. And it feels weird, just the dichotomy between those two. I didn't really like the trailer very much. It does not fit the tone of the movie because it's trying to be very lighthearted, and this movie is not so.
I feel the exact same way. I was really surprised because the song is lighthearted, and I understand it's supposed to be one of those weird dichotomies where, you think it's all fun, but it's something horrible is going on. Sometimes it kind of works, but in this instance, it didn't work at all. And I found the trailer to be totally misleading because the trailer by itself, what I'm seeing on the screen is interesting. Right. I would want to go to the theater and see what this movie's about. It looks like a really crazy space adventure that's going to be scary and violent, but we're still back on Earth with the Cloverfield monster. I think there are monsters on the spaceship. From that standpoint, it did want to get me into the theater, or I guess to my couch.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Oops.
But you're right. The trailer is very deceptive.
Yeah. I don't know. At least they kept it subtle. I'll say that much. You don't really know what's going on, and then it gets this Cloverfield label on it. What? Yeah. Keeping that theme of secrecy alive still, even three movies in, they're not going to get rid of that. There's no way they're going to not make a movie so secretive, at least with the trailer. So, yeah, there's some definite issues with the trailer that just don't fit at all.
Well, currently the movie holds a 5.6 on IMDb.
Yikes.
Yeah. That's a big drop considering the previous two. The first one holds a 7. I don't remember what the second one has, but it's higher than a 7. So to go from there...
It's a whole...
Yeah, so the first one's here, the second one goes up, the third one drops.
That's a whole 1.5 down. I think the second one actually had about a 7 or so. It's pretty high. Yeah, that's not good. Did they even record a cinema score for this? I mean, I feel like I doubt it.
No, that would have been impossible to find a cinema score for this movie since it was released directly to the homes.
That's fair.
Unfortunately, because I really do enjoy cinema score, but I did go ahead and look at Rotten Tomatoes. For the second movie, about 90% of critics recommended 10 Cloverfield Lane.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Only 16% of critics recommend the Cloverfield Paradox.
Oh no. Oh, that's still not bad. Good.
And 46% of audiences recommended as well. So between critics hated this movie.
Yeah, critics panned it. Audiences
don't care for it.
Yeah, it's still on the low end, but it's pretty close. It's closer to 50%. So they got some people who liked it, but for the most part, you almost universally hated. Oh man,
that's pretty bad.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and talk about the production of this movie, because it's got a pretty interesting production before we start talking about the movie. So, well, like I said, this movie was going to be released by the time this podcast comes out, the movie was going to be released the weekend before. That's why we're recording right now. That's why we started the Cloverfield retrospective series when we did, was so we could lead up to the weekend release of this movie. Now, this was not the first time this movie had a release date.
Like the fifth time that it was changed.
About the 5th. Yes. So I heard about this movie actually back in 2012 or something. Very early on, I heard of it as The God Particle.
Yes, that was the original name of the script that they picked up, the spec script. Once again, we have a spec script entering into the Cloverfield universe. This happened... Actually, this script and 10 Cloverfield Lane picked up roughly the same time.
Right. The one thing that's interesting, though, is the script for 10 Cloverfield Lane was pretty much a fairly easy and seamless adaptation. And they really went in deciding what they're going to do. With this one, they were shooting the movie and they're halfway into production, and J.J. Abrams is still trying to figure out, he's like, hey, why don't we work this into the Cloverfield universe? How can we do this? So that's why they were involved in making the production a lot longer because of trying to work this into the universe.
Right. Yeah, it wasn't decided until after production began to try and work it into the Cloverfield universe. That's when J.J. Abrams made the decision. Well, I'll save my thoughts for that later. But yeah, interesting choice to make it after the fact. The actors already began production to work it into the universe.
I do remember actually hearing news about the God particle before it was with Cloverfield. And I remember for a while, John Krasinski was in talks of making this movie, producing it. We had no idea what to expect. But then he left early on, years before it got to the point where it did.
Right. Yeah, I do remember hearing about that. I remember we were pretty excited, I was pretty excited when I heard that John Krasinski was going to be starring in it. Gave me some hope because nothing really was being said about this movie. That tends to be pretty normal for these movies at this point, though.
Right. So the third Cloverfield movie was announced late in 2016, only really not many months after the release of the second movie. And I was super excited because I was super high on the second movie. I loved it. And originally, this movie was slated for February 2017. Then it got pushed back to October 2017. And then it got pushed back to February 2018. And the final release date, and I've got proof of this, last year in 2017, at the beginning of last year, it was one of my most anticipated movies of the year, The God Particle. And then for this year, and the same thing happened with Insidious, actually. There was 2 movies on my list in 2017 that did not come out that year. And then when we were creating our list, which you can go listen to in the archives for most anticipated of 2018, we had down this movie, and we had it down on the schedule for this time because we were expecting a theatrical release. And honestly, it was tentative. I remember we were not quite sure if it was going to happen because this movie, I was like, this movie may never come out. It is just being pushed back and pushed back so much.
Right. It's funny, though. You're putting a release date for a movie on 4/20. That seems just a little bit odd for me, but maybe that was just because maybe it's just happenstance. They had originally scheduled it for release on 4/20 and then just pulled it back. Actually, pulled it forward, I suppose, and released it much, much earlier. That just, for me, it just sounds kind of funny. Maybe it'll make a little bit more sense when we get into the movie.
So the funny thing is, it was slated for February 2018, pushed back to April 20th, 2018. Surprise, it came out February 4th, 2018.
Yep. Also a complete surprise to the actors. They did not know this was releasing until the day of, on a conference call that morning.
Oh, really?
Yes. Wouldn't you believe it? Not even the actors who were involved knew about this release date, keeping that theme of secrecy alive, even in the real world.
I don't know. I do remember watching the Super Bowl 52. I'm just sitting there watching the commercials, and all of a sudden I see this interesting sci-fi movie, and at the end it says the Cloverfield Paradox, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is it. And it says releases tonight after the game.
I remember you texted me.
That was crazy.
Immediately right after the trailer, you're just like, oh my gosh, Cloverfield's coming out tonight.
I know. I was shocked because after playing with so many release dates and coming out like 2 to 3 months earlier than expected, plus this was the very first time. I don't think this has ever really been done before, where the trailer comes out a couple hours before the movie is released.
Yeah. We'll get into the marketing a bit later, but yeah, don't think that's ever been happened before. And I know that J.J. Abrams stated that this is not going to happen again. You have to take the opportunity to surprise the entire world with this kind of a movie. because the whole theme of secrecy and everything. And he's like, and his dream, well, not his dream, but he was more or less just saying that you never get this opportunity. Never once would I be able to surprise the entire world with this movie and release it that night for everyone to see. That's interesting. I mean, we'll talk about good or bad later, but it's interesting that that's even a possibility because of Netflix and things like it.
Oh yeah, it's a whole new age. Like, that would never work theatrically. Oh, no. Nobody would come to your movie opening weekend because the word of mouth would not be spread enough for you to turn a viable profit or even make enough money. But with Netflix, where it's got a gajillion subscribers, I don't know. I was blown away. I was shocked. I was surprised. I was ecstatic because I was like, this is awesome. Oh my gosh. It's a total surprise. A lot of the YouTube reviewers I follow were just blown away. They were all watching it that night and releasing reviews within 24 hours. Everybody was going nuts because we know the first two movies were always shrouded in secrecy. The trailers dropped about 2 months before their release, and even then, the trailers didn't reveal much. This was kind of the pinnacle of that, where it's like the trailer dropped 2 hours before the release of the movie, and everybody who subscribes to Netflix, which is a massive majority, could watch it that night. It was crazy.
Well, let's talk about Netflix for just a minute, because they became interested in Cloverfield Paradox December of 2017, and then in January of 2018, it was official that they had bought the rights from Paramount for $50 million. The reason they did this is because Paramount was getting a little bit concerned with how much revenue they were going to make with this. The production had skyrocketed past what they had ever expected. I don't know what the official budget originally was, but it had gotten to about, like you said, 45 million at this point. And so they were still in post-production. They had pushed it back months and months and months, and it had actually been a whole year from the original release date in February to even longer projected release date. So then Netflix got interested, and Paramount's just like, oh, well, I guess we can make money off of this. And so they gave Netflix the rights to release it. And because they were afraid that it wouldn't make any money in the theaters. And that's why Cloverfield was originally added to the project, because they were afraid that it wouldn't make any money in theaters. So it's interesting.
So basically, after they reworked a lot of this to work it into the franchise, and post-production was also very strenuous on the budget, which increased it a lot. And that was the main concern, is we can't market this movie very well, nor will this movie probably do very well. The Cloverfield movies always have a small budget, and they don't do phenomenal at the box office. They do well, but they don't go gangbusters. They don't do Marvel numbers or anything like that. So it made sense for them to sell it to Netflix, I would say, because they made their money back plus an extra $5 million.
Right. They made some kind of revenue versus how much would they have made in the theater. I really kind of been curious to see what those numbers would have been had they put it out in theaters.
I don't think it would have done well in the theaters at all, because this movie had been delayed so many times. It makes sense to me. They're like, honestly, I feel like they think this movie wasn't going to do well with critics or audiences. So that's why they're just like, get it out on Netflix. We need to just get it out. And it's interesting because we learned Cloverfield 4 was finished filming and had a release date of this October before seeing any footage for the third movie. Right.
I mean, yes.
That's almost unheard of.
You're right. I think that it was a good financial move to just kind of give it to Netflix. I mean, at least for release, they are still keeping it for production later on, of course. But yes, good. It was a good move for them to just give it to Netflix and make some money off of it versus risking not making anything at all. So that is a good financial move. But fourth movie is finished filming before the trailer for its prequel, or I guess its predecessor, I should say, also is released. Why is Cloverfield so weird?
I'm gonna save my thoughts on maybe that reasoning for the very end of this review, but I do have some reasons why I think that. Well, listeners, before we go any farther, we want to tell you we are about to spoil the Cloverfield Paradox. So if you have not seen the Cloverfield Paradox, then the only way to see it is on Netflix right now. You can go stream it from your televisions. It's really not that long of a movie, so go ahead and hit pause, go watch the movie, and then come back and we will have fun talking about all the details of it. You've been warned, we're about to spoil it. In the year 2028, the Earth has a massive energy crisis which is threatening to plunge the world into war. Hamilton, played by Gugu, must go up to the space station Cloverfield with a crew of the top scientists from every major country to enact the Shepard particle accelerator. This technology will provide infinite energy forever, therefore solving the world's problems. Upon many failures, the crew tries one more time and is supposedly flung across the galaxy. In reality, they're on the other side of the sun, but in an alternate dimension. Bizarre things occur, including finding a new crew member and the death of many others. Once the crew figures out how to return home, they are thwarted by the new member Jensen. Hamilton stops Jensen by shooting her out into space. The only two left are Hamilton and Schmidt, who return back to their Earth to find the Cloverfield monster taller than the clouds as credits roll.
I think it's obvious at this point that this is riding off of the heels of Alien. It's homaging Alien. It's using different elements that Alien also used. I feel that if it wasn't obvious already of them just being in this space station, I think it should be said now. This is taking quite a bit from Alien.
Oh, absolutely. And I would even say probably Prometheus and even Alien Covenant, because Prometheus did extremely well, and this is not very original, I would say.
Especially that ending blowing Jensen out into space. Very clearly Alien-esque. There are small elements here and there. The whole crew dynamic is they're trying to ride off of Alien. There's a lot of Alien-isms in this movie.
Well, something else, it's very popular in science fiction movies now to have your eyes messed up and creepy things coming out of your eyes or swirling in your eyes. We saw this in Prometheus. We see this happen with Volkov. I'm like, that is so obvious. Of course it's going to start with his eye. That's very cliche now, it seems like. But to begin this movie, it is extremely exposition heavy.
Oh, yeah.
We have repeated exposition where we hear it on the radio, and then Michael and Hamilton talk about it again, and she's like, so what you're saying is you want me to go up and do this and this so I can save the world in the energy crisis. And
not just that, but they're also being incredibly vague. So it's kind of like they're tricking the audience like, oh, what are they going to do? But we already know that she's going to be up in the space station anyways. And then, like you said, they just restate everything the radio just told us, like no more than probably 30 seconds ago. And they're sitting in line to get gas.
Right.
Yeah, repeated exposition for really no reason at all that I can think of.
So, on my first viewing of all three of these movies, I thought they all took place at the same time. Clearly, I wasn't paying attention to the details. I just assumed, okay, they all take place at the same time. Well, we talked about why the sequel does not take place during the second one. You can go listen to that there. And then this. Okay, so here's where I thought. In the second one, you hear about a blackout on the southern seaboard. Right. So that's what I thought this was. I'm like, oh, this is taking place during the second one, except it's where the blackout is. And there's different things going on. And, okay, you know how in the first movie, at the very end, you see something fall from into the water? Okay, so I thought in the end of this movie, when they're falling, I'm like, oh, it's all connected. This is what falls into there. And I'm like, I don't know why the monster's so big, or clearly I wasn't thinking at all, because clearly none of those events occur at the same time or places at all. Technology is different, events are different, and this movie does answer why there are alien invasions taking place in 3 different decades, actually.
Right. Albeit an interesting explanation. So we're led to believe in 2028, yes, okay, the Earth has an energy crisis. That I can get behind. That makes sense to me. But we are also led to believe that there is this particle accelerator that's been made, and it's supposed to create essentially infinite energy that we can just use. And they put it out into space so that way it doesn't do anything. And we have this entire montage sequence of them trying to get it to work, and it isn't working, and years go by, and still nothing's working. Alternate dimensions, though. What? Okay. I want to track logically as to how we went from energy crisis to alternate dimensions. And it just feels to me like we're just making stuff up as we go along. And this is just an excuse so we can have more movies that don't actually connect to each other, but kind of do because aliens.
Yeah, the explanation, I think, is incredibly sloppy, and it's just so easy, but yet it's very not confirmed. Yeah. I know that was really poor English, but what I'm trying to say is they don't definitely state it outright, and you're still left with a lot of questions. I remember the day after the movie released, there was lots of reviews, and then right after that, there was a lot of videos explaining how all 3 movies connect. And basically they say they connect because this particle accelerator caused a rift in the space-time continuum and opened up, as Mark Stambler's character says, monsters, demons, beasts from the sea. And I said, well, how's that for exposition? How's that for foreshadowing?
Right. Okay, here's my question. So what? I mean, I think that's just my biggest problem with this movie in general, is there's just a lot of things that happen, and there's not much of a reason given to them, and we'll get to those events in a sec. But, dimensions, though. Yeah. A riff in the space-time continuum versus a movie about aliens, this just feels weird. Like, Cloverfield is meant to be weird, and I understand that, but it doesn't feel like Cloverfield to me. This just feels like, oh no, how do we do this? And they just kind of make something up, whether or not it actually makes sense.
So I know you had an issue with the end of the second movie. I'm assuming you're having big issues, that's what it sounds like, with the third movie, like just the entirety of it.
Yes. Very much so. And when I in the last review, I said that really the only issue that I had that was really movie breaking almost was that ending. And I did not like the ending that we had opposite views on it. And I remember stating that if it wasn't for this ending, I would have loved everything about it. But I feel like this ending kind of just goes against whatever else the movie had set up. Anyways, I talked to my roommate after I had finished the movie, and I kind of discovered something, that this ending feels like a lot of what this movie feels like they took the ending from 10 Cloverfield Lane and just made it into a movie. But worse, because it makes no sense at all. And then we have such lazy script writing to force things to happen, and we'll get to details in a minute. But this random things happen for seemingly no reason, but just because it's cool, and it just, it feels so, it doesn't connect. That's my biggest thing. It doesn't connect not only with the universe itself, but it doesn't connect introspectively. It doesn't connect as a movie, just like in general, because random things happen for reasons.
Well, I think my biggest issue is this MacGuffin particle accelerator, that I understand this movie is science fiction, and in some ways we have to suspend reality, but I can't suspend reality to the point of it being a fantasy, because clearly they are grounding this movie in reality with, oh, we have the energy crisis and we have war breaking out and we have all these different scientific techniques as the top minds, yet somehow they have figured out this supposed magic machine which they can't even get working until they come up with this really stupid explanation of, oh, we just need to like vent the carbon exhaust or whatever,
condensation,
and it's just going to work forever.
Actually, that has been causing all of their issues. Wouldn't you believe it?
Yeah. And it just frustrates me because I'm like, are these scientists the smartest in the world or are they stupid? Because every time there's a problem, it could be easily solved. And they're like, oh my gosh, all we needed to do was flip it on or something like that. Anyways, I had this big issue with Elysium where there was just too many things where it was all magic, basically. People could be magically healed. There's going to be this utopia world. None of it was explained. It was just thrown out there. And I'm like, okay, you can't ground a movie in reality and then introduce fantasy and magical elements all of a sudden. And I feel like this is what this movie is doing. I don't understand it's impossible for this particle accelerator to generate infinite energy that the entire world could use. This is some of this utopian stuff that resolves all conflicts in the world, essentially, and it doesn't work. It's frustrating, honestly.
I think, that I do agree with you for the most part, but I think the thing that really doesn't make any sense to me is the fact that they don't spend any time to try and explain the particle accelerator. Because they just expect the audience to just believe that they have this magical device that can solve all energy crises. I can understand why they would bring in that idea. And I think that is a pretty relevant idea, pretty relevant theme, because yes, we are kind of having an issue with energy anyways, right now. So I can understand why they bring in this theme. But my problem is, like you said, they don't ever take the time to explain it. Now, there is a movie out there called Primer, which is a very hard sci-fi, and it grounds its own reality, and of course, it's not real time travel, but it makes it, the way that they explain things makes it feel like it's almost possible, and the fact, the level of detail that they go to explain the ins and outs of that movie is incredible. Now, this movie is the complete opposite, because they, like I said, don't take any time to explain anything about this particle accelerator, which makes my suspension of disbelief. I cannot believe this because they do not take any time to try and help me believe that this would exist. Like you said in Elysium, yes. Actually, funny, I actually had a point in my notes where I referenced Elysium with the self-healing machines or whatever that we find.
Oh, yeah.
Which never come up again, by the way. But regardless, yes, they both have pretty similar issues where they ground themselves in this reality, but don't ever take the time to try and explain it in detail to make it to make it not just a fantasy, but something that maybe could possibly happen. And they don't try that at all here, and it really brings the movie down.
And I honestly think that's one of the problem with a lot of modern sci-fi is they introduce these fantastical ideas and try and pass them off as plausibilities, but without giving the audience anything to go off of, which just throws us into confusion and disbelief. Absolutely. I do feel like this is a little similar with Christopher Nolan's movie Interstellar, where they have to save the world, they got to get off the planet, and Michael Caine's character is constantly trying to solve the gravity equation, but I don't know what the gravity equation is, and I don't know how it works, and neither does he, because spoiler alert, Michael Caine never solves it.
Right.
It just, you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
Elysium did it. There's these magical MacGuffins. Ooh, the gravity equation. That's what we got to go after. Ooh, the Shepherd particle accelerator. Sounds cool, but I don't even, if the writer doesn't get it, then how is the audience supposed to get it?
Exactly. Never once do they ever try and explain this is what a particle accelerator is, because it just sounds like a fancy name just because. But okay, going back to what you just said, this is where my biggest issues come in, or the events of this movie, because to me, it feels like just random things happen because the writers think, oh, this would be a cool idea. The biggest thing for me is when the guy, I don't even remember his name, I really could care less, but he is essentially, from what I understand, is putting the panel back onto the wall where they found whatever, Jensen. They found Jensen, and I think he's putting the panel back onto that section of the wall, and his arm just gets sucked into the wall. Why does this happen? It never answers, except the fact that, it's parallel dimensions. And then he loses his arm, and then finds his arm again later on, but it's not his arm from that dimension, but from another dimension, and it gives them the clue to cut open whatever his name is, and to find all the worms, but that goes nowhere because movie except parallel dimensions. This is what I'm talking about when I say that this movie makes no sense and is very hard to follow, because they don't even try to help the audience understand how we got from A to B. Instead, it just goes, this would be a cool idea, and then just runs with it, even if it's totally stupid, because the guy getting his arm stuck in the wall, whose idea was that in the first place? And it just feels like we're just making things up because that would be a cool idea to throw in this movie, even if it's not.
Yeah, so I put in my notes, random things happen on the ship for basically no reason.
Oh, yeah.
So
basically,
literally what you just said. And I said, everything is so thrown together in this movie, nothing makes sense. It really doesn't make sense, because Volkov, the Russian, who I don't think he has a very good Russian accent anyway.
No, he doesn't. Nobody has a good accent in this movie.
So he apparently becomes possessed, because he starts talking to himself like, yes, I'll do it. And he's possessed, and he is told to make a gun.
How do they have the option to do that is my question. But whatever, we have to have conflict somehow, I suppose.
The worms are in his body, and the other magical MacGuffin, that the big cube, big polygon, octagon
the gyro,
shape,
as they call it.
That's in his stomach as well. This movie seemed a little bit like Final Destination to me, because
that's a good point, actually.
There was lots of deaths in this movie. Clearly lots of kills. And they really like to highlight those kills in this movie, where one character is picked off one after the other. You know they're going to somehow get magically locked in the room, and something bad is going to happen. One is going to freeze to death. One's going to be shot out of space. One's going to be ripped apart. One's going to gyrate and shake or get taken over. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. The lady is in the wall, and she's magically healed. So there's a ton of issues with all of this. It's basically Final Destination. They should have called it the Cloverfield Destination.
Yeah, they really should have, because you make a really good point. This is basically Alien plus Final Destination, but slap a Cloverfield title on that and we're good. Yeah,
pretty much. And the exposition is ridiculous, because the worst part is the Mark Stambler section, which some people believe this Mark Stambler guy on the TV is Howard from the second movie. Many people believe that is his brother, because I believe they share the same last name. So there's no confirmation of that, but clearly they have the same type of theories from what we learned of Howard in this movie. And the other thing we should note is the lady he's talking to on the TV, that is the same lady who runs to the bunker when what's her name is trying to escape, and she's all messed up and she's banging her head against the wall.
So the neighbor.
Yes, the neighbor. That's actually the same actress. I don't know why. But anyways, the Mark Stambler sequence is ridiculous, because he's like, monsters, demons, beasts will be ripped open from this paradox. And they use the word paradox in this movie so much. Like, when Michael says it later on in the bunker, he's like, it's a paradox. I'm like, I'm thinking of The Princess Bride, Inigo Montoya, where he's like, that word you're saying, I don't think it means what you think it means.
Exactly. What paradox are we talking about? That's what. Okay, I think that's one of the more confusing elements, is that they talk about this paradox, all this kind of stuff with this particle accelerator. What paradox? That's what I want to know. Is somewhere somebody thought that this was okay, and that's what bothers me the most. Is that we just say things and then don't do them, or we say them so often that they lose their meaning. Like this guy on the TV, somehow they get live TV up in space, but I guess I can suspend that because they're in, it's 2028. But why is he listening to this now? And why is it in this movie? It doesn't make any, there's really no reason for it to be here. I mean, let's be honest.
Well, it's pretty much all for the audience, and probably JJ threw it in because he's like, we need to connect this stuff. And, okay, I'm trying to think when I should bring this up or not. But did I mention how Mark Stambler says this will rip open the past, the future, and other dimensions? Yeah. Okay, clearly this is why aliens come to Earth in 2008, 2016, and 2028, is because... okay, and this opens up another issue. So it's not worked every single time, but this time they do it, now it magically doesn't work, but it throws them into another dimension. Why now and not the other times? And why will it repeat and work the second time?
I'm surprised that they think that doing this again is going to bring them back to Earth. But, right. Yes... Why does it work the second time? I guess I don't know, because I don't know. Now you bring it up, because I was thinking the condensation, but that doesn't happen until later in the movie when they do it the second time. Right. So they got lucky, I guess.
It doesn't make
it doesn't make any sense. It's only just because the script says so, and there is no reason for it to happen at all. I mean, let's be honest here.
Okay, I want to say 2-3 things.
Okay.
The opening credit scene is clearly riffing off the second movie, except it's not as effective. I do enjoy this credit sequence, this montage sequence. I think the music is well utilized here, and it does kind of get me interested how nothing's working, what's going on. So I'm kind of intrigued. It's weird because the credit sequence and title sequence are really disassociated. We don't get the title until 11 minutes into the movie. Get that.
Okay.
But right before that, I gotta say, I did really enjoy the shot of Hamilton laying against the window with a video of her kids playing and kind of the ship revolving around, and then it pulls out. I was like, oh, okay. So from the beginning, I am intrigued, but yeah, after that, everything falls to pot. And I gotta say, Michael is my favorite character in this movie, but he is completely pointless. All of these scenes on Earth are pointless.
Right.
Why?
Right. You bring up an issue that I think kind of carries on throughout this entire movie. The scenes on Earth, every single one of them are pointless. The opening scene of this movie is one of the worst elements of this movie because it just repeats everything to us that we'll learn later on. And that completely removes any kind of sense of discovery because, okay, the opening of this movie, we get Michael and Ava talking, and he's trying to convince her to go up into space, and she doesn't want to because there's an energy crisis. Well, she goes up anyways. And then we find out later that she's a a housewife, and she's had a family at one point, and her husband's at home. And why do we need this opening scene? There really is no reason to have it because it, for the most part, just repeats everything that we'll learn later. And this scene when she is sitting in her like dorm room essentially is, I think, the scene where the movie probably should have began.
Oh yeah. I can definitely see that. I agree.
And okay. I will say that the opening montage sequence, I wasn't too big of a fan of it. Once again, they could have cut it out and they explained what happened, that we've been here for so long and we've tried this so many times and it doesn't work. And I think that would have sufficed. Michael, I find his accent to be not that great at all. I wish he had a bigger role because the only thing that he really does is pick up some random little girl, and well, at least we're led to believe that he gets her back to her parents. That's it. Other than that, it only serves to show what all is happening on Earth, but nothing much is happening anyways. So what is the point?
Right. The reason I liked Michael was because he seemed like a great husband. He was a leader. He was a level-headed guy. He was very understanding. He goes out of his way to do the right thing. He's the only character that I could see a lot of virtuous nobilities that I could latch onto, whereas I don't care for anybody on the ship. I think David Oyelowo's character is a leader. I think all the other characters are fairly stupid. I don't even really care for our main character, Hamilton. I don't know why I should care for her. Honestly, I think her plot is a little similar to... Her backstory, I should say, is a little similar to Manchester by the Sea. I'm not going to give anything away for that movie, but Manchester by the Sea is super powerful and emotional. This was still sad, but I was like, well, okay, what? Just because they're trying to figure out a way to create conflict, even though this still wouldn't work for her to go to the alternate dimension Earth because her person is already there. It's a different family. But back to Michael, his scenes are basically pointless. They don't serve any purpose in this movie. This movie is just trying to meet a satisfactory runtime, I feel. And the only thing that was going to pay off, which didn't, which I was frustrating, honestly, when he goes to that bunker, I was like, oh my gosh, are they in Howard's bunker from 10 Cloverfield Lane? That would have been an awesome twist. Nope, just a random person.
Right.
That we don't see, and it's utterly pointless. So,
well, I think that gets into a very, very big problem with this movie. The Cloverfield Paradox is completely devoid of any emotion because there are things that happen in this movie, and you do not get any real performance from anybody. It feels like, okay, the only scene where I feel like there may have been some kind of substance was the scene between Jensen and Ava when Jensen and Ava, and then there's one other when she talks to the captain. With the scene when she's talking to Jensen is essentially she's finding out that her family is still alive in this dimension, and then later on she finds out, or no, later on she approaches the captain or the commander and says, "I want to go home," and this, I think, is one of the more interesting parts of the movie because it brings up a very interesting issue, which is she could live with her family again and stuff like that. Now, obviously, the commander says that's kind of dumb because you're still in this dimension too, so there's going to be two of you. That's an interesting point, and I think that should have been the hook of this movie, is that Ava wants to just go home and see her family again after they traveled across dimensions and are now in a completely different one. Movie doesn't even try and go there, but other than that, there is no emotion in here. Every single one of these characters is so flat, and their acting is not only hammy, but it's so unbelievable that I begin to just not care what happens because so what?
So who is your least favorite character?
Oh, what is his name? The guy who loses his arm.
Me too. I put that in my notes. I'm like, Chris O'Dowd, that's his real life name. He is not funny in this movie. His comedic timing is ridiculous.
Bless his heart. He tries so hard.
It doesn't work at all, though, because in like super serious scenes, he'll say things and... I could not stand him. I was so glad when he left the movie. I couldn't
like when he finds out the worms are gone, he goes, "Oh wait, the worms are gone." It's just almost all of his lines, especially in the second half, they just become laughably bad because they're so stupid. That scene, and then later on, he says, "Yeah, my arm helped us find the Earth."
Yeah, it was. To the point of frustrating, but
that also, this also brings up another interesting problem, like really big problem with this movie, and that's that the Cloverfield Paradox calls itself out on its own stupidity more than one time and just thinks that it's okay to leave it alone and not touch it. Whose idea was that? Why would you do that?
Do what? I'm confused.
Okay, so at one point in the movie, the Jensen says to Ava not to trust Schmidt, right? And so the commander goes and looks up in the logs what exactly happened. We find out later that they aren't from that dimension. They're from the other dimension that we got those messages back and forth. And turns out in that dimension, Schmidt was, I think, a spy, I think for Russia or Germany or something like that. Anyways, so Commander doesn't even think twice, takes Schmidt, locks him in an airlock, and says, stay here. But even Schmidt is just like, you're going to believe Jensen on this? And he goes, yeah, and just closes him in. So that's one moment. That one's not too big of a deal. But there's one later on with whatever his name is, that the missing arm guy that we just talked about. So it's the scene when Volkov he dies, and they cut him open and they find a gyro, right? And the line is, we're going to trust something that we found in some man's stomach. Good luck, everyone. The movie calls itself out on its own stupidity, and once again, also later on talks about how the arm found the earth or whatever. It calls itself out on its own stupidity and then doesn't even try to fix it. What script does this?
Oh, I agree. And one of the big stupidities that I was irritated with was when they believed that this thing somehow flung them across the galaxy, like it has capabilities of light speed, or opening up a wormhole or a black hole that would just suck them from like one place to the other. I don't know, that doesn't make any sense. But I'm extremely frustrated because these scientists are supposed to be the best scientists in the world. They don't even know how to read a constellation. Like, they can't even look at the stars and be like, oh, well, this constellation is in this part of the hemisphere or whatever. I don't know, because then all of a sudden they're like, wait a minute, we're on the other side of the sun. Oh my gosh. And then they just like tilt their like spaceship over a little bit and they're like, oh my gosh, there's Earth right there.
But here's the craziest part though, is that they tried scanning for radio signals and they couldn't find any. But once they found the Earth and they realized, oh wait, we're on the other side of the sun, magically they could find them. What?
I know. I was like, you're telling me you couldn't see the sun this whole time, nor could you use any... They're like, well, we don't have the technology. I'm like, so you can't just pull out a compass or something? I mean, this is old school mathematics with gauging the stars and where you're at. And they couldn't even figure out they're on the other side of the sun. And it's not like there's any other planets that might be on the other side. I don't know. I mean, it's rotation. Right. It was just really stupid.
Yeah.
But, okay, I will say probably the most intriguing aspect of this movie, which I still think isn't played up to its full potential, is when Jensen appears in the wall, and then we see a picture of her with the crew, and this mysterious woman has come on board. I'm like, okay, that's fairly interesting. But ultimately, I don't know, it's not amazing. It doesn't really do much for the movie. But something I wanted to talk about is this. Is there a possibility of a multiverse or an alternate dimension? This is something I did a little bit of research into. And the other thing that I wanted to say is, before I get into that, is the movie is a little confusing about whether they are in an alternate dimension or whether there's two dimensions that were like spliced together.
Yeah, they kind of mention both, but don't ever really give a clear answer.
Right. So according to my research, like a multiverse would be an entirely separate universe, just like ours, but we would have no access to it. And from what I understand, in one of many different universes, there would be like the exact same things going on, but with different cause and effects or different consequences. Right. And that's what this movie is portraying. Right. So in our universe, Hamilton, her kids don't die, but the world is plunged into war and the Cloverfield spaceship crashes. So it seems like there is an opposite effect. So if, like in the other world, kind of like in The Man in the High Castle, the Nazis won World War
Right.
II. That's what this is proposing, basically. And I was introduced to this concept, I believe, in my 6th grade class. I don't know why, but the science teacher, he was a cool guy. He was like, there's possibility of another dimension where there'd be the exact same me, but he would make the opposite choice, And Stephen Hawking, who just died recently, he said, yes, absolutely yes, this is what is going on. This is why our universe is so finely tuned, is because there's so many different universes that one of them had to get it right. And there was also other universes that got it right as well, but, different things are going on. Well, Christian theologians such as Hank Hanegraaff would say absolutely not. There's zero evidence, there's no physical evidence of another universe. And even the agnostic theoretical physicist Roger Penrose says Hawking's theory is impotent, misconceived, and insufficiently rich. And I'm going to have to come down on that side as well, because this introduces a lot of problems, because that means that there would be multiple copies of everything, which is totally illogical. Or it means the creator of the universe made multiple people, and some versions of ourselves would go to heaven, some to hell. Everything is left up to random chance, essentially, or just inverted realities. Plus, also, if you're a Christian, it completely brings up the question, so if in this world Christ came and died and was resurrected, then in another world he didn't choose to die, and then in another world he didn't rise again, which totally just destroys all theology or all premises of a intelligent design or a natural creator. I feel, if that makes any sense, it brings up a lot of issues, and I think it ultimately impossible there would be anything like this in reality.
Right. Yeah, this is something that we will never know if it is a reality or not, because it's such a far out idea that is completely impossible for us to prove or maybe even disprove that it honestly, it's a possibility. And from what I understand, maybe the reason that your 6th grade teacher was telling you about multiverses, from my understanding, that there is also a theory out there that exists where every decision that you make splits off and creates its own multiverse, where you have 2 different universes that exist, where one is where you made the decision and the other is where you didn't make that decision. Whatever decision you made is a reality is where you went to, and stuff like that. So yes, there could be a universe where the only thing that's different is that you wore an orange shirt today, or something like that. That's part of the multiverse theory. Then of course we also have the religion aspect of it, where, okay, well, if Christianity is meant to be true, or is meant to be believed that it is true, if this is true, this multiverse theory, it becomes a reality. Oops, we just almost essentially just ripped apart that whole theology. It's hard to say, and it's an impossible thing to prove, because we can't just go to another universe, especially not with the technology we have now. To be fair, this movie isn't exactly going down that route. It's more of just playing on this idea of, oh, what if it is possible? But you do bring up a good point. Who knows if this is true? And even if it is, it's such a far-fetched idea. It's kind of one of those things where we believe that we're all in a simulation, or that this entire life is a dream. There's really no way to prove or disprove it, but it's a theory that exists because we're just humans who are curious, and we really want to know answers to everything, and we thrive for discovery and knowledge. But yeah, it's this discussion of a multiverse. I had to do a speech over this when I was in, I think, it was my sophomore year in high school. So I remember little bits, but yeah, this idea of a multiverse. It's hard to discuss because yes, you're right. There could have been one where if this okay, so it's saying that this exists. There could be one where Jesus Christ did and did not die, and the one that we're living in right now is the one where he did. And what's going to happen if the one that he doesn't die? We don't know. It kind of even goes to show that maybe the movie is trying to harken towards this, but I highly doubt that the movie went this deep. But I think one of the things to kind of learn from the multiverse theory is that every decision that you make is going to have some kind of consequence, whether that be good or bad. It's going to have some kind of consequence, and that you really should think about your actions before you do them. That kind of what it goes on here is that they decide that they want to find this renewable, infinite energy resource, and then it accidentally flings them into a different dimension, and then they have to find a way to get back, but then accidentally most of the crew except for 2 of them die. So it kind of goes to show that your decisions are going to have some kind of consequence. Really think through your decisions. Don't just go off of blind faith. Because we have this infinite energy resource, the lives of the world now are basically in the hands of whatever, not only whatever the scriptwriters can make up, but whatever aliens there are now, which is what the movie's going for, I think.
It's kind of funny that what was supposed to give the world everlasting energy unleashes monsters, and it's going to destroy the world or something.
Right. See, this is kind of where this movie could have been very interesting, and it kind of even ties in with Ava's character arc when she talks to the commander, which about how she wants to go home and see her family again. And that's kind of parts of this I feel like are quite interesting. But the movie, unfortunately, doesn't even dive anywhere near that kind of interesting dialogue or interesting themes. It just kind of takes it all surface level, or not even that sometimes. It's sad. This could have been quite the interesting movie, but it doesn't do it. I think probably a better movie to discuss this kind of stuff would be 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Which you can go watch the explanation video on our YouTube
it's very
page
true.
right now. That movie is super deep, unlike this movie. Well, okay, so we're basically nearing the end, and honestly, I feel like after a certain point, everything is just filler until we can get to the end. The only thing I really cared for here in the end was I thought the scene where Hamilton realizes her family is alive in this world, I felt that was nicely handled, and with the music. And also, I did think it was kind of interesting how it's called shepherd for a reason. Like, I can see the symbolism, like the shepherd takes care of the flock and leads the flock. Well, that's the whole point of the shepherd, is it's supposed to be kind of watching over the world and taking care of the world. I felt like the symbolism was nicely handled and wasn't too overdone. The CGI is well done, and I did like the twist of the blonde knocking out Hamilton, and I felt like that kind of fight towards the end was pretty good, although I don't really understand why Hamilton doesn't want to go back to Earth now.
Yeah, I feel a little bit more on the opposite end. I feel like the last 30 minutes is kind of where the movie begins to be somewhat kind of maybe interesting for me, partly because of Ava's decision that she wants to go back home, that I felt was interesting. Although Jensen's turn to be evil makes no sense to me, but whatever, I guess I'll just take it and leave it. It's just, you're right. This is filler, but at least for me, it was a bit more interesting filler than what the rest of the movie was giving me. That is not saying much. This ending does not redeem the movie in the slightest. This action scene with Ava and Jensen is whatever. I mean, she gets blown out into space just like an alien. I mean, we kind of see that comment. It was pretty interesting visuals to that video of her family is playing. I don't know how Ava got a hold of it, but video of her. Oh no, I do remember how she gave it to her. Anyways, video of our family is playing, and essentially it just goes to show symbolically that she's not going to go back to Earth. I think that she realizes that decision that she could make is not one that would be for the best. It would make things worse. I think that's kind of where the movie's going for, why she decided not to go to Earth. But they get the particle accelerator to work after whatever her name is, who speaks only Mandarin, for whatever reason. She dies because she drowns in an airlock? Okay. Anyways, you're right. The ending kind of builds to something that once again, so what? You know, the whole movie is just
I do think it has a good message about appreciating your loved ones and not taking them for granted. But honestly, at that point, I had really checked out of the movie. I just wanted it to be over.
Yeah.
And I did kind of like the monster coming up through the clouds as they're falling to Earth. But I'm just... First of all, the monster is huge, which is crazy. Being taller than the clouds, that's unbelievably bigger than the Cloverfield monster in the first movie. And I don't like how this movie shied away so much from the Cloverfield monster. They did a good job of keeping it in the shadows in the first one. They kept us in suspense until the end, but I felt like we had sufficient alien action in that one. In this one, they kept it in the shadows on Earth, and then we just got it at the end. I mean, it kind of worked popping up there, but at the same time, it's just like, well, why? Yeah. This is the third installment.
Yeah, I agree. This ending is... It honestly, they could have kept it at just this, because we do get to see kind of the monster when Michael's on Earth. We hear the roar and the thump of the monster doing things. So it's clear, maybe not clear enough, but it's speculation up to that point that, maybe the Cloverfield monster from the OG Cloverfield is here as well. We never get confirmation of that, but I feel like the movie could have just stopped it there and not have had this ending scene with the Cloverfield monster, and it would have worked a little bit better. I don't really like this ending scene with the monster. It just feels like they tacked it on just to confirm for a fact that this is a part of the Cloverfield universe, even though it's in the title. I don't know. It feels kind of like the ending to 10 Cloverfield Lane to me, where it's just tacked on just because there isn't much else I could really say about this ending that I kind of have already said.
So, Alan, what is your rating and recommendation for the Cloverfield Paradox?
Okay. Well, I've said it a couple of times in this podcast. Just going to reaffirm once again. This movie to me is so what? Like, there are so many things that happen in this movie, not only for no reason, but literally because the scriptwriters think that this would be a good idea, and they force the script around that idea to somehow maybe make it work, even if it doesn't make any sense. It's sad that this movie is so not good at all that it is attached to this universe. It makes sense to me now, looking at the pre-production, or I guess just the production in general, about everything it had to go through just to get released. But this also brings up an interesting question to me. What about the Cloverfield universe as a whole? And I'm going to come out and say it right now. There is nothing special about the Cloverfield universe. And I say this because in the last two movies, especially, neither script was made to be a Cloverfield movie, and J.J. Abrams came on and forced Cloverfield onto it. The second one works a bit more because at least we subtly lead into it, and that had themes that were already kind of Cloverfield in the first place, leading to an ending that I did not enjoy. But this second one just forces it. Everything about this is just not good. And everything else I've kind of already said, but I'm just going to come out and say it. There's nothing special about Cloverfield. Literally, the reason Cloverfield the universe exists is because it gets not very well-known scripts into the limelight, which in some sense is a good idea. But when you're sacrificing good ideas, like good scripts, for adding on things like this, I don't know. So for me, this is a 3 out of 10. High not recommend. There's no reason to see it, to be honest. It tries to connect the two movies, but it ends up not being anything worth it.
This movie is a mess. I am so glad I didn't pay money to see it in the theaters. So, yeah, it made a lot of... I'm really glad Paramount ditched it to Netflix, because I would have been really frustrated coming out of the theater wasting my money on that. Though I do have Movie Pass now, so it doesn't technically matter. But at the same time, I don't want to have to take the time to get dressed and go to the theater and sit with everybody and just sit in that theater where I could... Anyways, after 2 viewings, I see this movie has serious issues with genre and creating a compelling story. This movie is boring. I don't care about any of these characters, and creating a utopian world without explanation is a page taken from the poorly done Elysium. After a perfect predecessor, I was excited about this movie, but severely disappointed. Overall, this movie is dismal and receives a 4 out of 10 with a solid not recommend.
Yeah, after seeing it, because we both watched it before we watched it for this viewing, but at this point, after discussing it, this script is unfixable. There are so many things that just happen for no reason, and to get from point A to point B requires those. This would need some serious rewrites if they wanted to make it competent.
Yeah, I will never watch this movie again. I think it looks nice, but the story is just terrible, and the characters are terrible, like I just said. This, honestly, you know, I thought Cloverfield was good. I thought 10 Cloverfield Lane was perfect, and this movie, I think, is a dismal heap of garbage. It is a weird roller coaster we're on with Cloverfield right now, and we're about to go even weirder because the Wrap reports that this was just a one-off to Netflix. So, listeners, this October, supposedly October 26th, when we are getting Cloverfield Overlord, is what it's being called, you can't watch it from the comfort of your home. You will have to make the trek to theater and shell out some cash unless you have MoviePass. But it being theatrically released gives me more confidence the movie will be better. Otherwise, because clearly they had no confidence in this movie, that's why it came to Netflix.
Yeah,
so
unless
it does give me some hope.
Unless this suffers from the same fate as this movie does, where it either gets delayed or gets just pushed straight to Netflix. We'll see. It is unconfirmed what's going to happen just yet. We still have a few months before we get there anyways.
Yeah, I don't expect us to see anything, maybe August.
Yeah.
I would assume late August is at the most when we would be seeing anything. If we don't see anything by August, the late August, I would say, and if we don't see anything by early September, then it's most likely not going to come out in October. But honestly, I have a very strong feeling it will, because we know the plot of this movie, and it's been talked about frequently. Like I said, I could be wrong, but this new movie, we're going back to World War II.
Oh, yeah, I remember this plot.
It's crazy because this movie is progressively leaping into the future, taking place over 3 different decades. I just can't even understand how this is going to tie in. It's basically about U.S. paratroopers finding Nazis using supernatural magic on D-Day.
Oh, what?
Yeah, this is what Cloverfield Overlord is going to be about. I hear there's going to be Nazi zombies, hopefully. I think that's what the Call of Duty crowd's hoping for.
Oh, I really hope this is a lie. Honestly, maybe this is just up there just so we can take the bait and then they do a bait and switch on us later, and that's not the plot at all. Honestly, that's silly. That's really silly. There's no way I can get behind that. Yeah. I really hope this is a joke.
Yeah, I know Hybrid Network has been talking about Cloverfield Overlord. They've got a video about it. They've been reporting this Nazi stuff for a long time now. So that makes me think, I'm pretty sure this is what we're going to be seeing in theaters. I just can't even understand. Honestly, all I can picture and visualize right now is the very beginning of Hellboy, where they find the Nazis engaged in the occult and opening a portal to unleash a monster. That's basically what I'm thinking of. I'm also thinking of that really B-movie, Netflix Frankenstein movie.
Oh, yeah.
I can't remember what it's called right now, but you see the Nazi Frankenstein monsters like on stilts and other creature things. I never saw it, but that's what I'm visualizing right now. And I guess maybe some Call of Duty Nazi zombies.
A little bit late. About 10 years too late on that.
Yeah, it just got revived, I guess, technically, with this new game.
Well, it's been on every game that's not in the Modern Warfare franchise since World at War, which is in 2008. Right. So I think it's in every single Treyarch game, if I'm not mistaken.
So, listeners, I'm planning on coming back to talk with you guys about Cloverfield Overlord this October. We will see. I'm really hoping after this movie it will be good, because honestly, from the ratings we gave it, you could really only go up from there. I mean, if it would be hard to go down, and shocking if they went down from here. I mean, I just can't imagine JJ putting out just the horrible. Just I can't even imagine.
Yeah,
I'm really.
I just hope that they make Cloverfield relevant. That's all I'm hoping for. I'm excited to see what they do, but I really hope they stay true to what made Cloverfield, the first one, so successful, and the second one almost as successful. We'll see. I mean, we have still a couple months before we get there, of course.
Well, listeners, thank you so much for joining us for the third installment in the Cloverfield retrospective series. We thought we were leading up to the release of the third. Well, we kind of were in a way, but surprise, I guess in a way, we're leading up to the release of the fourth. So for now, the retrospective will be on hiatus until we come back for the fourth one, and we will make sure to keep you updated if we do, or if the schedule changes and we decide to come up with something different instead. Make sure to go head over to our YouTube channel and click subscribe and share with your friends, because we are doing a ton of brand new weekend of releases that come out the day the movie comes out, or the day or two after. It'll be out that weekend. We're doing that for a lot of movies. We've got a lot of other plans for YouTube videos. Also, for more written reviews and other guides, go ahead and head over to our website, silverscreenguide.wordpress.com. Make sure to send this podcast to your friends. We love talking about movies, and we love engaging with you all as well. We will be coming back next week for the muchly we will be coming back next week for the much anticipated Avengers Infinity War, which is being touted as possibly the highest opening weekend of all time, and maybe even the highest grossing movie of all time. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised. I'm looking forward to it. I know, Alan, you are not the biggest Marvel fan, but I think we might have some fun with Infinity
I'm curious
War.
to see what they do and how they handle it. I can't... excited a little bit. More or less just curious to see what they're going to do. Like I said, I'll just wait till we get there, and we'll talk about it. But that is next week, so that's close.
I am caught up with all the Marvel movies, so I didn't get the opportunity to go back and rewatch the older stuff, because there's like 20 of them, and that's a lot, and especially it's a lot to do your senior year, your final semester of college. So I do plan on going back and ranking all of them probably before the second Avengers movie. So I'm going to do a lot more with the Avengers that way. So anyway, listeners, thank you so much again for joining us. Make sure to share and subscribe. You're 21st Century Kids. You know what to do. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much, and we'll catch you next time.